Hello, America. Shelby Busch with We the People AZ Alliance and USA Alliance. Joining me here today is Aaron Wagner. He is the owner and operator of Net Concepts. He is also a certified CISSP professional.
Close. It's a certified information systems security professional.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot. That's a mouthful.
It is a
there, Aaron. Just goes to show he's got some credentials that I don't understand. So we brought Aaron here today to talk about all of the controversy surrounding the passwords, the Board of Supervisors, the routers. What is going on with this audit? And why are all of these little things that should be so simple more complex? So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you had shared with me that you had the privilege of watching the Board of Supervisors hearing on Monday, and Steve Richer talked a little bit in there. Can you explain to us kind of what you zoned in on with Steve Richer?
Yeah, actually, there's two things that I think are important to talk about right away. First of all is that, you would expect the Board of Supervisors to maintain a level of professionalism. They shouldn't be insulting a company and saying you're inexperienced, you're this, you're that. You really want to wait till you see a report and then make a judgment on the report. That's the professional way to handle things. The second thing is, it was very interesting to me to hear Stephen Richer say that they were seeking the passwords for the source code for Dominion software.
Senator Fan has asked us to provide one additional password that would allow access to the Dominion software source code. We do not have that password. It is not needed to run any of our operations. It is not needed to run tomorrow's elections. This is like how you can run Microsoft Windows on your computer without having access to Microsoft Windows source code.
Which, if you look at what Karen Fan wrote, there's absolutely nothing in there about source code.
So what was Karen Fan and Cyber Ninja asking for?
So it said very clearly that they were looking for device passwords, device administrator passwords.
Okay, and so explain to me, what is source code and why would we need source code and what is device passwords? What are the difference in these?
So source code would be so I'm going to write an operating system or I'm going to write a program. So I'll get into some kind of language like C++ or whatever, and then I'll write the code, the source code for that application or that operating system.
So that would be kind of a patented, privileged passcode?
Well, okay, so in the validation process of any of this software, yes, they look at the source code. So that is important in audits, but that's not what they asked for.
Okay.
It's very clear in Karen Fan's request.
So they're asking for device code passwords, right? Device
administrative
passwords.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what would that do? Why would we need access to that, and what is the difference?
So typically when you're on your home computer, you might log into the computer using your username and password that happens to be an administrator account. That is a security risk. So typically you won't see that in an enterprise, a large company, right? In a large company, those accounts are divided. So you have users will log into a user account, and then you will have administrators who will use that account to manage systems.
So what could you get access to in that administrative password that maybe another user, somebody who worked the tabulating room, for instance, wouldn't be able to access?
There's a lot of things that you can change. You can do things from alter databases to deleting databases or any number of things. With the administrator account, that is an account that's designed to control the system.
Okay, so you say control the system, and the county recorder's office, who ran our elections, and the Board of Supervisors, who oversee our elections, have both said they don't have this administrative password.
Again, We do not have that password.
So essentially, are you saying then that if they don't have that password and Dominion actually has that password, then they could potentially control our elections?
That is a strange thing. I mean, you think about it, the third party has the administrator of accounts, right? So what that means is it's kind of like leaving somebody alone in the server room, because you're giving them access that you don't have, that allows them to alter things that you can't then look at the accountability, right?
Wow. Okay.
So it's problematic.
So it could potentially mean that things could have been changed, altered, things could have happened that if our county recorder and our Board of Supervisors are both saying they don't have access to it, they could sit here and tell us they're running a clean election and legitimately believe that, but they would have no way of knowing.
That's correct.
You, the former recorder, the recorder's office, and the elections department should be applauded.
Wow. Okay. So we understand the administrative passwords, and that's what they were actually looking for, right? But going back to what Steve Richer said about source codes, you found something interesting in the contract. Do you want to share that with everybody?
Yeah, the contract between Dominion and Maricopa County, Section 3.8 Source Code Escrow Requirement. Dominion suggests the escrow terms for the current agreement between the parties. Contractor agrees to enter into a third-party escrow services agreement, naming the Arizona Secretary of State as beneficiary. All application source code for the software used in the vote tabulation system and all upgrades thereto shall be held in escrow under said agreement.
So in reality, as a protection to our state, even the source code should be in control in some regards of the state.
Well, yeah, but it's what it says is that the state, Katie Hobbs, and her office has access to the source code, not Maricopa County. So you have to wonder how cyber ninjas or Ken Bennett and his team would somehow end up with the source code and asking for the passwords. It's a very strange line of questioning. And it's strange how it was not mentioned in Karen Phan's request and it ended up in Stephen Richer's statement, because the two have nothing to do with each other.
So why would Stephen Richer say source code then? If you didn't see that anywhere in the request, so why do you think Stephen Richer said we can't give you the source codes?
I mean, you have to assume that Stephen Richer read the contract, right? So if he read the contract between Dominion and Maricopa County, he would have known where the source code is in the first place. And then if he didn't read the contract, wouldn't that be kind of irresponsible of Steve Richer to not understand how the contract between Dominion and Maricopa County works in the first place?
Well, when he's appointed or elected to be the chief officer in charge of our elections, you would hope that he would be well versed in this information.
Correct.
So it is quite interesting. It would also be interesting that we would put a source code in escrow to protect the state's interest, but allow Dominion our administrative passwords, which would actually be essentially our checks and balances to what went on in our elections.
It gives control of device passwords or device. And the thing is, this whole thing is silly in the first place, because you don't have a password for administrator accounts anymore. I mean, it's not 1995. The way that it works is if you're an administrator, then you create a password for your account. And if I'm an administrator, I create a password for my account that's unique. There is no password.
Well, unless Dominion never relinquished that control to our elections department.
Or if they're sharing passwords between, and this is also very interesting in that the way that Dominion worded their statement was that it would put things at risk. Well, the only way that a shared password could put anything at risk as if you put the same password in multiple states or multiple counties.
Wow.
Right?
That's
Why would you? Okay, think of it this way. All right, let's say I did give you a password and it's your password that you can't change, right?
right.
And so an audit comes along, somebody takes a clone of the software and they bring it over here and they say, I need your password, okay? So you give them your password, they do their audit, you change your password, no problem. But let's say you had control of multiple states and you used the same password among all those states. And somebody comes along, does an audit in one county in one state, and then says, oh, we need to change that password. Now, if you went around to multiple states and multiple counties and said, oh, by the way, I need to change your password. Well, why? It would cause a question as to what the processes are within Dominion.
So it would almost be safe to assume that if this were true, then Dominion would be the one controlling elections across this country for those elections ran on Dominion software.
But doing it in a way that's actually dangerous and irresponsible, if that's the case. If you follow what their statements say, right?
Right.
Now
Because if I give you a password to my computer
right.
and let you access it as my technician or my professional, and you go in and you do it, and then you leave and I change my password, it doesn't affect anything, right?
Right, that's correct.
It only affects me and any damage you may do to my computer if that were to be the case. So it would put nothing at risk because we've entered into an agreement.
Mm-hmm. But also think of it this way. Let's say I did give you a password, and we're kind of putting this in different terms.
Okay.
Let's say I gave you a password, and then I went to my next customer, and I gave them a password. Now, what if something happened to this other customer, and I came back to you and said, hey, I need to change your password? How would you feel about that?
Ooh.
You know?
I would feel like you didn't have my best interest at heart.
That's correct. That's why that's such a huge problem. Now, it gets interesting because when we transition into the whole router issue, there's a similar theme behind that as well.
Well, but the routers are a whole different issue because it's my understanding the routers are storing medical health protected information and sheriff's department social security numbers. Does that make sense to you?
What their statements actually expose is two things. One is that so think of a router like your home router, like a Netgear or whatever. You don't install applications on it. It comes as it is. It has firmware, and that firmware comes from, let's say it's Netgear. And when there's a firmware update, you install it, you update it. That's all you install on routers. Now, when you get into the corporate world, the routers are bigger, they're more powerful, but essentially the same thing. They're all based on like a very scaled back version of Linux. Okay? So they're not designed to install software. Now, if we think of the issue of them saying, well, if I give you this password, you'll be able to access other systems. What that says to you is it's possible or likely that you have routers that are centrally managed. And why that's important is that, let's say, given today's world, you look at large companies such as the pipeline that was just breached, right? Microsoft was recently breached. It doesn't matter what company you are, how big you are, security can always be breached, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at it that way, any part, in counties especially, counties get hit left and right. And there's many reasons for that. But think of if some part of the county were hit and breached, right? then that means that they could traverse other parts of the county and its potential to be able to access the election area. It's not a true closed network if you have a centrally managed system.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, what this means is that if going in through the router and looking at the traffic in the router would allow me access to the Maricopa County Health Department and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department and all of the different components of Maricopa County, then the same would be true of our elections, and somebody from a computer in any of those departments that had access could go through the router and breach our elections.
That's the potential, right? The other part of that is that, again, you're back to this argument of shared passwords, right? If I give you this password, it will put other systems at risk. Well, that only occurs when I'm sharing passwords among multiple entities. So, like, for example, the Maricopa County, their election systems and the sheriff's systems, those routers should have separate accounts and separate user rights so that I can hand out a password for the router for the election system and it doesn't cross over to other networks unless you're sharing passwords again.
So what you're saying here is we have a way bigger security threat than even our elections alone.
If we follow their statements, right? Their statements could be a blunder of not understanding how these things work, right? And making assumptions. It could be that you have somebody within Maricopa County who manages these systems using sloppy processes. That's a possibility. Or it could just be like, it could be something where they're not telling you the whole story.
So they're either ignorant, incompetent, or lying.
That's it. Accurate.
Well, pretty much makes sense. I mean, they either don't understand what they're talking about, which is a concern. They either are completely incompetent to their job, right? Because they're using unsafe practice. Or they're telling us lies, and it's actually really very secure. They just don't want us to see what's behind door number 2.
That's possible. So again, this is why you don't say, oh, these people are inexperienced, these people don't know what they're doing, until you see the whole, you get to see the whole thing, right? You get to see what everything looks like, what the network looks like, how it's connected, what the audits of these systems looks like. Then you can make a judgment. Then you can say, well, these people were negligent because they didn't do this, that, or the other thing.
So if Steve Richer and the Board of Supervisors are accurate in their statements, then they essentially have admitted that this whole election process was left very unsecure.
Correct.
And if they're wrong in their statements, they're either being intentionally ill-advised or they're completely incompetent.
Correct.
So either way, this audit is extraordinarily important to not only Maricopa County, but our entire state and potentially the nation.
By their admissions,
right,
it creates a concern of a larger scale. So you can focus on elections if that's what you want to focus on. But you need to understand there's a bigger problem that's being admitted here. You're looking at everything within the county.
Who controls one of the largest budgets in the United States.
Right. I mean, sheriff systems and all the things that they're saying they don't want you to have access to, those are the things that are at risk.
But yet they're saying we should trust them.
Correct. Which now I have to wonder myself. I live here. I have to deal with the consequences of their choices. And I'm very concerned.
Well, thank you very much for breaking this down. I only have one more thing for you before we're going to call it a night. So you and I spent some time looking through the contract the other day. And one of the things that really stood out to both of us was a section where they talked about the scope of work that Dominion had. And now that we've had this conversation, it seems to stand out more to me, because if Dominion has the administrative control over these machines, it really makes this section of the contract even more predominant to us. Can you explain what it is we found there?
Yeah, so in the scope of work clause under election support, the Dominion project team will reach an agreement with Maricopa County on their specific roles during ballot scanning and election night. Dominion's on-site support resource will have the necessary skills to assist Maricopa County to ensure the polling location opens in a timely fashion and that the equipment functions properly. In addition, a key role for the on-site support resource is to assist Maricopa County with tabulation and results reporting. Dominion's active voting support strategy can be customized to meet Maricopa County's specific needs. Which, if you think about it, during installation and setup is the time, most of it, where you need the administrator account. To actually operate the equipment, that's when you don't need the administrator account.
So earlier I said the Board of Supervisors in the Elections Department, they're either ignorant, incompetent, or lying. In this case, if they aren't lying and they don't have these administrative passwords, and Dominion played these roles in the election, then essentially, based on the contract in their own language, if they're telling the truth, Dominion actually ran our elections.
That's correct. And you have to wonder, at what point is it possible that they could have lost control of any of the digital ballots? And then you have to wonder, given the letter that Katie Hobbs sent to the Attorney General, does that cross over into any of the areas she described that could be illegal?
So, again, we're going to assume they're not lying, and we're going to utilize their own words, and we're going to look at the contract, and we're going to look at what they said, and then we're going to say Dominion ran the elections, and now they're refusing us access to look and see how they ran those elections.
I think any honest person could come to a conclusion of questioning, well, what is your real motives? What is the real story? It really does cause a question of their integrity in the first place. It's not saying that it is, but it's certainly reasonable to question.
So you heard it, America. These problems may go way beyond our elections. And so not only are we dealing with the possibility of a very unsecure election, we potentially, based on the words of our own county recorder and Board of Supervisors who control a multi-million-dollar budget for our county, we potentially have a very unsecure network that puts all of our systems in this county at risk, from our protected health information to the security of our sheriff's department, all the way to our most sacred right, our right to vote. So when people ask, why is this election important and how do you trust this election? You have to also ask, how do I trust my Board of Supervisors? And how do I trust Katie Hobbs and Steve Richer, who are now intricately involved in our sacred right to vote? Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us, and I hope this was informative to you guys, and you'll join us back next week to talk a little bit more about this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again. Good night, America.
Good night.